Sorry. Hey guys, sorry about that. I was just celebrating the end of World War I and listening to Roar by Katy Perry. Which, did you guys know there was a World War I remake of that song? It's actually written about 30 seconds ago, and it sounds like this. The Allies have the eye of the tiger, the Germans, they are defeated. The Treaty of Versailles, it ends World War I. Alright, that's enough of that. Sorry you had to bear through that and listen to, it's going to take place of the awful jokes, and I don't know, maybe I'll do a video of all me singing, which will, I don't know, hurt your ears or something like that. But anyways, hey, we're in the time of the century. We are in the 1920s. Things are looking good. It goes by the Roaring Twenties. It goes by the Jazz Age, the Harlem Renaissance, the Dust Bowl. Wait, that doesn't sound too good. Anyways, things are starting to look up, but while they're starting to look up, there's something boiling underneath. And that is when we're going to start to get to the Great Depression. But before we get to that, let's celebrate the Roaring Twenties. Let's celebrate the positives of the world. What's going on in the United States? So before we start talking about cultural changes, we're first going to start by talking about the presidency. So the first question you guys got to answer is, what was the presidency like under Warren Harding? And Warren Harding, he is almost, described as this kind of babbling buffoon who has no idea what he's doing, and he is just kind of making it up as he goes. But he's kind of put in a hard spot. Now, Warren Harding, it's kind of strange that he ran for president to begin with. And the reason I say it's strange that he ran for president, he thought the president was like a ceremonial role. He didn't even think the president had anything really to do that was important. So he runs. He's elected. He had the campaign philosophy of return to normalcy. Again, after World War I, things started to look down. But Warren Harding, we're going to return to normalcy. We are going to have the time of our lives, and we are going to have a ton of money. The stock market is great, but things aren't always as they seem. So to first talk about Warren Harding and his administration. Now, one of the first things the president has to do is they have to figure out who their cabinet officials are going to be. They're going to be their closest advisors, pretty much their number two for many different things, because the president just doesn't have enough time to do everything. So he hires individuals known as the cabinet. Now, one of the reasons Warren Harding is often looked at as one of the worst, if not the worst president in U.S. history, is who he hires as his cabinet. Now, they are officially known as the Ohio Gang. Now, Warren Harding, he's from Ohio, as you can probably guess. He hires his best friends, which, a lot of you guys, when you have jobs at Dairy Queen or the grocery store, you probably want to get your friends hired. It's going to be the same thing that Warren Harding that he is going to try to do. So his cabinet, they're made up of his very, very close friends, except for a few individuals. And I think it's time to revisit whether or not Warren Harding actually had a poor cabinet. Because he had three very influential individuals. He had Herbert Hoover, and we talked about him in the last chapter with World War II and how he ran the Food Administration. He was very, very intelligent. He is the epitome of kind of rags to riches. So he's a very smart individual. He puts him in charge of a department. He has Andrew Mellon, who is one of, if not the richest person in the United States as part of the Treasury Department. He has Charles Evans Hughes, who is a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a part of his Secretary of State. So he hires very, very prominent, very smart individuals to be a part of his cabinet, but the rest are his best friends. And it was often said that Warren Harding, he didn't really make a lot of enemies because he didn't make a stance on anything. He just kind of took a seat back. When he was elected to the U.S. Senate, he actually missed more days than he was in attendance. And that's because he was out doing things with his friends. He didn't want to start any controversy, which, if you want to be president, I guess that's the way to go. Don't pick a side. Try to be right in the middle, not answer the questions. But this Ohio gang, they cost the American public millions of dollars. What they are doing, they're selling government jobs. They are trying to supply things for themselves. Basically, they're trying to get rich. And Warren Harding isn't really oblivious to this. He knows it's going on. He actually says, there's a very famous quote, that he is more concerned about what his friends are doing than his enemies. And I think that's very, an odd stance, because he is running the country. He is hiring these individuals who are going to be in charge of it. but he still is going to let them have the job. And that night, they would stay up all night. They would gamble. They would smoke cigars. They would drink a lot of alcohol. They would stay up, not really doing their official duties. But, there was a lot done. And Warren Harding, he was looked at as someone who really didn't do a ton as president. And I think it's unfair with where he's going to be put. He's put right in the middle of the progressive era with Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, and how they're going to start to make all these major changes in politics. And he just has kind of a hands-off approach. He doesn't know a lot about foreign politics, which, to his credit, he hires people to do that kind of stuff for him. But the Harding administration is often looked at as a massive failure because really not much was done. Not many stances were taken, and eventually the Ohio gang is going to be very, very corrupt. Now, one thing that does happen, and I'll move this here, one thing that does happen during his term as president is they do start something known as the Washington Naval Conference. And this was a good idea in theory, but it causes a lot of issues. So what it was is in 1921, Warren Harding invited major countries. He invited Great Britain, France, Japan, Italy, France. They all came to Washington to discuss naval disarmament. And really what that boils down to is getting rid of weapons. And by getting rid of weapons, they were going to try to make it so we could not have another global conflict, another total war. And really, this does the opposite. It sets up a lot of people who are going to be upset about certain countries having more. Really, there was a total of 3 treaties that were done. And talking about what the specific treaties would do is it said how many warships each of these countries could have. Now, America, because we really have a two-coast country, we were able to have the most. Great Britain, they were tied with us again because they were a two-coast country. And Japan was third. Now, the Japanese were upset that we were allowed to have more warships than they were able to have. And the Americans kind of did this because they knew that there would really be a time where Japan was going to start to become a global power. So they made them get rid of all their warships. So they were only able to have 300,000 tonnage worth of warships. But another big kind of controversy thing about it is it limits the size of a warship. So say, for example, your ship you're only allowed to have 5 warships that are 100 yards in length. What is every single country going to do? They're going to build theirs now at 99 yards. And it sets a limit on how large they can be, but really now what's going to happen is you have more cruiser ships. And you have more of them kind of going out around the world and patrolling areas. And it still is going to be a militarization where countries are starting to get as much as they can possibly have, because they're worried about this global superpower of United States and Great Britain of controlling everything. So the Washington Naval Conference, I guess you can say it's kind of a success because I guess they did reduce the amount of warships, but they also raised the amount of cruiser ships. And then lastly, talking about the Coolidge Administration. So Calvin Coolidge, he took over the role as president because Warren Harding, he died in office. He had a heart attack. And again, kind of talking about Warren Harding, there's kind of a rumor that he was poisoned by his wife because there was rumors, again, politics, you got to have all these rumors. There was rumors that he actually had an affair with 2 different women. So because of that, he's on a trip out west, and the thought is that his wife poisoned him and he died. But really what's mostly thought of is that he is going to die of a heart attack. Now, as we know, president dies, vice president takes over. Calvin Coolidge, now we're going to talk about his administration. And Calvin Coolidge, he is very, very quiet. He goes by the nickname of Silent Cal. And he was very, very quiet on a lot of stances. He would sit in during the cabinet meetings. He really wouldn't talk much. There's actually another story about him where he was at a party, and this person said, "My goal is to get you to say more than 3 words." And Calvin Coolidge responds, "You'll lose." So there's kind of a little bit of humor with that there. But Calvin Coolidge, he takes over, and he has a very, very different belief on what the U.S. government should be doing. Now, when he takes over, there's a lot of corruption. A lot of people are upset with the way the government is currently running. But he fires just about all of the members of the Ohio gang, except for the individuals that I talked about with Herbert Hoover, Andrew Mellon, and Charles Evans Hughes, because they are just so smart. They know so much about the country and politics. So he gets rid of them, and once he gets rid of them as a part of the cabinet, really the public starts to take his side. They start to approve and like the stuff that he was going to be doing. Now, once he's in office, he has a completely different philosophy on government. He believes in very small government. And what that means is he doesn't really want to interfere too much with business. He thinks that it should be left up to businesses to decide prices. Yes, they're going to decide things on tariffs and stuff like that, but he doesn't really want to get too involved with American businesses. He thinks if they can run, they can have competition. Competition, that's good for us. Give it a 2 thumbs up, because when competition happens, prices go down. All right, so that's going to be kind of why people are going to start to like that. But he lowers taxes, which people are definitely going to support. One thing that he does that makes a lot of people upset, and probably is looked at as one of the things leading up to the Great Depression, is he's against farm relief. Now, there is a massive surplus of crops in the United States, and the government, they offered to buy some of them, keep them in storage to subsidize it, and basically make sure that farmers, they were making a fair share, they were making a good living. And Calvin Coolidge, he was against that for whatever reason, but a lot of people were against him for that reason. He does win a second term in the election of 1924, but he's against farm relief. And really the only other major thing that happens while he's in office is the Kellogg-Briand Pact. And what the Kellogg-Briand Pact, what that is, essentially is a pact between major powers around the world that they are not going to have militarization. They are not going to try to ramp up their military and try to have the largest military they can possibly have. So they all signed this agreement that, yep, we're not going to try to go to war. We are going to basically leave our country as is. But while they're doing that, all the countries are kind of signing it and snickering. They're laughing because they know that they're actually going to be building up. But Calvin Coolidge administration, he was very hands-off. He didn't speak a lot. He was out in the public, unlike Warren Harding. But those are going to be the major things that are going to impact his presidency.